Hey, welcome back to the Modern Farming Podcast, where we bring you insights directly from the field about food, agriculture, and the incredible environment we live in. You know, Brad and I get to talk to so many people from around the country, and about a year ago, I went to a partners conference. Basically, in the tree world, there's a conference every year or every couple years, and they kind of bounce around all over the country. Anyways, while I was there, I got to meet Moy and Rocio from the Hope Center in Blue Island, Illinois, and I kind of kept following them because we had a really great conversation. I love what they're doing. Moy was really interested in what we're doing with biologicals and kind of feeding the soil. And so the other day, as we're always looking for guests, good guests to have on the Modern Farming Podcast, I reached out to Moy, and thankfully, they were both jumped in and wanted to jump on. And so we thank you both for being with us here today, Brad and I. And we're looking really forward to getting to know you and getting to know what your initiatives are and all the amazing things you folks are doing in Illinois.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you having us on.
Thank you for the exposure too.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. We're a small podcast. We're just getting rolling. We do have a bunch of people, but for those of you who know us and like us, please go and check out the Hope Center's website. Moy and Rocio will give us that information at the end here too. But hey, folks, if you can, just before we get rolling here, to give everybody, our listeners, an idea of what y'all do and some of the initiatives or how this all came about. If you could just share with us a little bit about the Hope Center and some of your initiatives.
Yeah, so let me give you a little bit of context before I do. We actually launched at the eve of that pandemic, and we did that in order to serve and resource our community. But before that, we were actually a church. I went to seminary to become a pastor. I had the privilege of coming back to my hometown in Blue Island, and I wanted to find a way to serve the community I grew up in and provide some of the same opportunities that I had that were maybe a little bit more serendipitous, but by design, workforce development opportunities, tackling food insecurity. So we found ourselves right at the thick of the pandemic, and we're a small Black and brown church as far south as you could go in Chicago. And here we are struggling with the existential realities of the pandemic. We were serving all of the essential workers. So it was very difficult as we were trying to navigate on how do we best help our community during the season. So what began as a small church plant ended up turning into a nonprofit organization focused on community economic development. That year, we were able to partner up with a myriad partners here in the community. And we were able to service and resource close to 10,000 people that year. It was great, but I feel that at the end of the year, we still weren't allowing our community to build capacity. We were enabling them. We weren't empowering them. So that's where sort of the wrestling began. And we started thinking, well, what is one way that we could actually add value into the community? And we started thinking about it as a team, figuring out what assets do we currently have at our disposal. Well, one thing is we have a building. The building has a dilapidated garage, and it's adjacent to a dilapidated piece of land where there used to be two houses on before. So we had that. We also had a lot of rooms inside. So we figured, you know what? Why don't we build a community garden? And why don't we turn this sort of nonprofit into an opportunity for us to create value into the community? And when we talked about what value we wanted to add, we said, well, as a pastor, I want to add spiritual value. Whether you believe in our worldview or not, you still have a lot of these philosophical questions that have to do with purpose. So we want to add value in that area. We also want to add social value, where we're strengthening the social fabric of our community by bringing all these different demographics together. We want to add economic value and provide economic opportunities, such as the microloans that we're providing, small business plans, helping a lot of first-generation Latinos go to school, or just at that matter, just anybody first generation go to college for the first time. I'm the first generation college graduate in my family. And then the last one is intellectual value. How could we equip the mind so that, as the old proverbial saying says, you're not just giving somebody a fish, you're teaching them how to fish. And in order to do that, we need to help build sort of personal agency, where not only are we building intellectual capacity within people, but we're helping them imagine a different future. And we decided to do that through technology. So we have a 3D printing lab, makers lab. They learn how to create their own geometry. Nathan Zwartz, he's an engineer. He also does the work of a patent attorney. He leads that department. We have Rocio, who has done a wonderful job, and she'll touch a little bit more on the specifics of it. But, we have an outdoor organic farm. We have a greenhouse. We have a chicken farm outside. Indoors, we have a hydroponics farm, an aquaponics farm, and we're currently putting together a maker space so that we could pickle, dehydrate, can, and freeze dry food. And all of this is a means to do three main things in our agricultural department. Number one, first and foremost, we want to tackle food insecurity. We want to help fill that gap between having equitable access to fresh fruits and vegetables. Number two, we want to focus on healthy eating and active living. Hypertension and diabetes are disproportionately it's impacting our community disproportionately. So by educating our community and not only eating a lot of these fibrous, rich, cruciferous vegetables are not only good for their physical system, but their overall well-being, because they build a healthy microbiome. So you have a healthy microbiome, your biome produces about 80% of the serotonin in your body. You also have a healthier state of mind, which allows you to engage in whatever work you're doing or allows you to build that intellectual capacity. So they're all part of addressing this holistic, the problem in a holistic way. And the last and not least of what we're doing is our mechanics department. Again, I shared a little bit about this dilapidated garage. I actually wish I could show you a slideshow of a few pictures and hit this present button, because I do have a few pictures. But this garage, we have master technicians, which master techs are considered the PhDs in auto mechanic world. They're not just ASE certified, EVT certified. I mean, they're just not journeymen. These are the ones that have reached the height of mechanical success. And they equip our community on the basics of maintenance in your car, but also on repairing your car. But again, these are all efforts of adding those being committed to these four values that we want to add to the community. But Rocio, I could let you get into the weeds of just the garden and what you do there. Everything that grows, everything that's green, is under the leadership of Rocio.
I like that, the whole wheat segue. Yeah, well, it's been a journey for sure. Like Moy mentioned, 2020 was a very pivotal, important year for us. As you know, churches were closing down. Access was very tough, and part to the efforts that we were doing to provide food for the community, we always kept looking at that garden in the back, right? It wasn't a garden back then. It was just like a lot that we had in the back of our church building, and with few members, it was custom to just go out and look at it, and it was like, that would make a great garden space. Just mentioning that I was on my own personal journey, just figuring out what I wanted to do with that hobby in my life. I was taking some permaculture design certifications, and I was really getting into it here in my home. And so it felt like, God putting all the circumstances together, making everything work, putting it together. When all of a sudden it was like, what do you think about, the back of the garden? Do you see, like, there's the back of the church, do you see potential there? And I told Moy, well, actually, I've been designing, I've been using this space as for my classes in order to be able to design this area for a permaculture garden. And so he became interested in it. I showed him what I had so far, and we just jumped to it. I would say that pretty much defines like our first years at the Hope Center. We just jumped to it. Just let's do it. Let's do it. Let's not think too much about it. Let's just start. And if God wants it, things are just going to start working, and that's pretty much how it has been so far. Just God opening lots of doors. So that's how the design came to be. So I would say our focus is to be a permaculture garden. So a permaculture design would mean that everything that is put into the design serves for a purpose, a perennial purpose, hopefully, and everything should work in a cyclical fashion. We're not just taking from our garden, we're also putting back into the garden, and everything's just kind of working together in order for it to work that way. The beds that we put in, our native soil beds that we put in, are intentional for a purpose. I could go on and on about how we design it and why we design it, but I don't want to I don't want to talk too much into that unless you want to. Like I said, I can go on for days.
Well, yeah, no, and I think we will probably dig into it, but let me ask you, by the way, fantastic introduction, both of you, and what you're building. When I was just telling Brad a few stories about when I was in Chicago, and that was like the first time I had been to Chicago was for that partners conference. And you walk down the middle of the downtown district there, and for Brad and I, we drive 5 minutes away from our house and we're into agriculture. I've lived that way for the last 35 years of my life. Agriculture has always just been a part of my life, big agriculture. So I could walk out into a field and be in the middle of 1 million acres in 2 minutes, But when I was downtown, I was walking around in the morning, I was walking around in the evenings. And I'm like, even if you wanted to even have a little garden on your patio downtown, you wouldn't have enough sunlight for long enough to even produce, So it hit me how difficult it must be for, Brad and I talk a lot on the podcast about food, health, and nutrition, food density or nutrient density of foods. And for a lot of people that live like Brad and I live, more in urban open spaces, those downtown districts don't even offer, like the kids who grew up there, correct me if I'm wrong, like they don't even, have they ever had any experience in the garden or growing food, or
Right.
what's the reaction there?
Yeah, it's always. I would say I'm an educator. I love to teach people, and one of the reactions that I get the most is like people don't even know like where tomatoes come from. It's like, oh, really? Like, or the fact that watermelon, comes from a vine, or like, oh, really? You get a potato from a potato? It's there's our concepts that are like mind blowing. So
Yeah.
I love that part, but it also, lets you know how separated we are from our soil, how separated we are from like where our food is coming from, and how that lack of education just affects the way that we live. I heard the story about someone having a pear tree and that they wouldn't harvest from their pear tree because, oh, I didn't know I could eat it. I've never sprayed it. I never did anything with it. So I'm just assuming that I can't eat it. It's wild.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's crazy. It's crazy because if you're not intentionally, like here, right, in the city, if you're not intentionally looking for that type of education, you're not going to receive it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you couldn't have said it better, Rocio. And I think that gap not only creates a gap between, our the food that we eat, but also it leaves a big educational gap in us. There's a lot of conceptual reasoning that happens as we learn on how systems work, especially with the ground. It's like, okay, well, we plant this, we harvest this gives us so much of a yield, and then afterwards we're able to save some of the seed for next year. There's a lot of financial concepts there you could learn from. There's actually even a lot of relational concepts that you could learn from that help you understand how the small ecosystems of certain communities work with ideas or even people. But because those concepts are lacking, not only are we lacking in nutrition, but we're also lacking in these concepts that we're hardwired to learn in order to create flourishing communities, because us people represent a pseudo garden.
Yeah. And it's not something on it, like at least in our community, like Moy mentioned, we're a Black and brown community. So they are skills that were there a couple of generations back. So if you look at it that way, we've lost that skill in a short time frame. And
Mm-hmm.
just a lot of people will say, "Oh, you know what? Yeah, I remember my grandma doing that. Oh, I remember this, I remember that." But it's just, so short of a time, we can definitely lose such an important skill and connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's the same here in Florida. I mean, we're the city kids are 30 minutes, and we grow everything in Florida depending on the time of the year. And these kids in St. Pete and Tampa, they don't know where an egg comes from, and there's chicken farms 30 minutes an hour away. It's mind-boggling
Yeah,
how
yeah,
somebody from my generation has a hard time grasping that.
yeah.
Mhm. Right.
So let me ask you this. So the Hope Center, um, is there obviously there's a demographic that you're servicing. Is there an age group? Is it mostly younger people and kids, or is it everybody?
Our target demographics is low to moderate income families, starting with teens. So our target demographics within these families are first teens and then working adults. Our goal is to get the teens in the door, but generally, if the teens have to be dropped off by parents, we could hopefully engage the parents so
Mhm.
that we could engage the whole family unit to learn together.
I love
No, it's
that.
difficult just because as we're offering a lot of our offerings, I mean, recently there's a survey that I sent out to the community just because we're testing a lot of our assumptions around agriculture. Our wonder was, why is there not enough people from the community involved in our community garden? We thought that's what our community needed. But after the survey came back, we found a few things. Number one, we found that a lot of the community works on the weekend. So
Mm.
their low to moderate income families are working a lot. Do they have any discretionary time? Are they if they were stay at home moms, it'd be a lot easier, but mom and dad are working, or single parent households are working throughout the week. The little bit of discretionary time that they have usually doesn't go to get involved in the community. So we're trying to figure out, how could we now change our concept from a community garden to help you build a balcony? And this is what our sort of tagline has been: from your balcony to your backyard, or your windowsill to your backyard. This next weekend, we're going to help our community grow microgreens, and Rocio is going to teach on the importance of the nutritional side of microgreens and how easy it is to grow them. So yeah, there's a lot of these, kind of ideas that we're bouncing around with as we're testing our assumptions, just to make sure that we're more accurately defining creative solutions to some of the problems we're finding in our community, and not just come with the set of assumptions saying, well, this is what we, feel they need, so this is what we're going to create. It's like, no, let's gather data and let's be, driven by the data decision making that helps us be better informed.
Yeah. I think definitely with partnerships in programming, it's a lot of young youth, like Moy mentioned. I do see, like, specifically in the area of gardening as well, we've got a lot of traction with, I would say, young adult women that are just wanting to get that skill back into their life and family lives. Like, as I hear a lot the same story, which is young mothers, once they become moms and they start thinking about, what am I giving to my children? What food do they have access with? They start thinking about that, and they start growing into that skill. So I definitely see that a lot. And that's part of my journey as well. It's a big portion of what I do, what I'm doing.
Impressive. So are people is the community seeking you out, or do you have outreach to bring people in and show them what you're doing?
So it's actually, there's three components to that, and I mean, first and foremost, we thought that if we built it, they would come. It's just like, okay, you're going to build this really cool, these really cool ideas. Everybody's just going to come, and it doesn't necessarily work that way. I think a lot of people that have come as a result of some of the workshops that they've been a part of, and it's been a word of mouth, invitation. So that's one. In addition to that, we've also built a lot of trust with our community and the local chamber of commerce, which they've been big fans of ours. So people have been singing the Hope Center's praises and referring people to us. But now we're moving more into a strategic way of marketing, and that's by doing like geofencing marketing, targeting marketing, figuring out who these demographics are and how we could best reach them. So what we thought of before as sort of just this blanket shotgun marketing approach, now we're fine tuning it to a more laser approached marketing. So it goes back to the old saying: it's either you work harder or you work smarter.
Yeah.
And with our heart to want to impact as many people as possible here in the Chicagoland, because both Rocio and I come from humble beginnings, and we've been given a lot of privilege. So to come back to our community and actually provide the educational components, the resources that maybe we were given to, again, maybe just by happenstance, we want to provide that for our community by design. So we want to open up the same opportunities that were given to us, but exponentially to the community.
Moy, do you have any, I think the auto mechanic thing is so cool. I mean, I've been saying for years, I mean, our kids aren't learning trades. We need tradesmen.
Yeah.
There's no shop in school anymore. Do you have any plans to diversify into carpentry or anything else to kind of teach kids trades that are not learning in school other than ag and auto mechanics?
Yeah, at the moment, we want to become really good at the three things we're doing. So
Gotcha.
we don't have any foreseeable future. I mean, Rocio and I just, I'm graduating from business school in 3 weeks, and Rocio has been a great sounding board just because I've been the visionary, and Rocio kind of puts these pieces of the puzzle together and materializes them. So I've been pitching this idea of carpentry for the sake of this. I'm actually envisioning creating affordable housing for Chicago by creating these micro communities. And these micro communities are going to be sustainable agricultural micro communities, where the houses are going to be designed in such a way where it's going to force the interaction between the people in the community. But the garden that's focused in the center of this community is also going to force there to be certain interaction and working together. But the folks that we prepare on the carpentry side will be the ones building these micro communities and these divested communities. So that's the BHAG and Jim Collins's word from his book Good to Great. Like that's the big goal for the next 5 years. Like once we could sort of reinforce what we're doing now, I think in the next 5 years, I would like to begin to launch into maybe creating micro homes that have that are sustainable in terms of having geothermal heat, solar power, harvesting rainwater. Where they're sort of maximizing their sustainability purposes and also reducing a lot of carbon footprint. And it's not because I'm leaning to the right or the left with these ideas, as much as I'm leaning right into sort of my core beliefs as a Christian, where I believe that God placed us on this earth as stewards of this earth. And there's a level of responsibility that I have to steward what we have. So that's my whole impetus for making sure that we move towards a sustainable way of agriculture, whatever we're doing.
Yeah, no, that's a great vision. And I'm a soil health consultant. That's kind of, that's my world. And, whether you believe in Genesis 2:7 that God took a handful of dust and molded it into man and blew life into it, or if you think some organism came out of the ocean and went into the soil and did whatever for millions of years, we still came from soil.
Right.
I believe the first one. And so that's why our microbiomes are so similar. You
Yeah.
study the gut microbiome in the soil, a healthy soil, the similarities in the actual
Yes.
biology is astounding that you can imagine
Yeah.
what's in our gut is also in the soil. So there you go.
Yeah.
Well, so
And
quick
I'm
question. Sorry.
just to add to that a little
yeah.
bit, and it's not just the microbiome. Emerin Mayer has this book called The Mind-Gut Connection, where he talks about the relationship between the mind and the gut, and a lot of it is based on what you eat. So there's a strong correlation between the two, and understanding the basic principles of it helps us better equip ourselves in taking care of our bodies and and the creation around us.
For sure.
I'm sorry, but yeah, go ahead. You're in the middle of saying something.
No. Brad and I have talked about. I think we actually had a series a few weeks ago, Brad, that was something titled "You Are What You Eat," and because we know it, Brad and I know it. We know what's in the soil. Actually, a lot of some of these soil inputs that we have are microbes from our gut microbiome, right? So there's a lot of similarities. But you mentioned something about our responsibility. And I just wonder, I think I probably know the answer, but I just wonder, when you have young people who have maybe never tilled in the ground to grow something, do you have to teach the responsibility, or is that something that comes once they plant a garden, they harvest the garden and see what we can do and what we are completely in control of and responsible for?
Yeah, you have to teach it. You have to teach it, just because sometimes, we become so conditioned by our surroundings that we don't even realize it at times. We begin with a certain narrative that we tell ourselves subconsciously, and that the community tells ourselves. So to be able to explicitly explain the importance of these systems that we find that are just laws. What you sow is what you reap. It's just a principle. Whether you believe it or not, it's a principle, and that principle matters what type of ground you're actually planting in. And the same is true for the communities. You see the divested communities and the upper middle class communities here in Chicago, just because there's so much, there's so much segregation here. You kind of see it in so many different communities. I always ask myself, what makes it okay for this community to throw all of their trash out at the stoplight, and it's riddled with trash? Like, a lot of that goes down to this basic idea of there's no repercussions for what I do. Somebody's going to pick it up, so it's not my responsibility. But when you live in a community that you're taught differently, wait a minute, if I throw it out, it's going to look bad in the community. Somebody's going to have to pick it up, or these plastics are going to go back into the ground. They're going to contaminate the ground, and we're going to plant into that ground. So there's a lot of these ideas. Now, I don't believe it's completely the people's fault, because sometimes you're not, Warren Buffett said that he won the uterine lottery. Like, sometimes you never have the option of what, uterus you're born out of, and what time you're born out of, and what your socioeconomic, ethnic, you're not in charge of those variables. So because you're not, I think that there's an importance to recognize some of the challenges that we find in divested communities, where they're just working to survive. And that's just the sheer truth. My parents immigrated from Mexico. They landed here in Blue Island, figuring things out. My mom and dad, they had 4 of us kids by the time my mom was 21. And I'm the youngest of 4. So children having children, trying to figure it out, growing up in the low-income community, understanding how to navigate a lot of these, gaps in language, gaps in culture, and still trying to do the best with what you can. I tell my mom and dad, I don't blame you for anything. Y'all were trying to do the best with what you had. And now it's my responsibility. I have a little bit more privilege and a little bit more awareness. Now it's my responsibility to figure out a way how to steward that. And it's also my responsibility to teach my kids that it's also their responsibility. So there's this communicated invitation of cultural values that needs to be communicated, not only within our family systems, but even within the work that we're doing here in Hope Center, so that we communicate a lot of these systems and how they work and how important they are to ourselves and society.
Yeah, so I agree 100% with what Moy says. Also, like, it's hard to gain responsibility or ownership over something if you're just looking at it through the sidelines, Like, once you get involved, once you go through it, then you kind of grasp that responsibility. You also take that ownership, and you also get your pride, there's pride in it too. So participation, involvement, volunteering are very crucial aspects to that responsibility as well, I would say.
So, Rocio, when you have these teenagers, they're starting to work in the garden, you're doing some stuff, and they harvest a crop or whatever that be. I just wonder, what is the relationship that before they start interacting with the Hope Center, what is their relationship with food or nutrition before they start working with you?
I would say, if all of the groups that we've had of young folks coming through, it's been very low to none, I would say, in order of like nutrition and knowledge, overall knowledge of where food comes from and what does it do in my body.
Yeah.
Because you can see it in just like in their interaction with the soil, with the bugs, it's like just being outdoors, exposed to the sunlight. It's a real quick contrast to their everyday life. Definitely.
So great.
So what does the garden look like? Is it a lot of perennials? So you've got some tree crops, you've got some perennial bushes, and then you have annuals. I saw some pictures of some watermelons.
Yeah.
And I guess your season, what is your season? 6 months? I mean, I've always lived in Florida, so I'm kind of foreign to.
So our outdoor growing season goes between May and October. So it's a short window of time for outdoor exposure. All of those frost sensitive crops, we have to start a lot of those indoors early on because we don't have a big window to grow. Now that we have the greenhouse, so this year it's the first year we're growing in the greenhouse. We're hoping to extend in the spring and in the fall to give it a couple of more months. But yes, to answer your question, we have a little bit of everything. We're kind of creating that little ecosystem in our little 1/5 of an acre area. But in that area, we've been able to fit berm beds or native soil beds, raised beds. We have our 14 by, I think it's 16 by 48 long greenhouse where we have our raised beds in there. Our chicken coop, we have an area that's dedicated for pollinator habitat. So a lot of native perennials are in there to attract all of those insects and birds that we want in the area. We also have like a little fruit tree guild, which we're adding more fruit trees in it this year. And around those fruit trees, we're growing more perennials, flowers and herbs and all of these things.
Very cool. So are the chickens in the garden? Are they feeding in the garden? Are they going around eating insects and worms and making fertilizer?
By city ordinance, we're not supposed to, but we do let them roam.
Food safety issues and everything else, sure.
We do let them roam for sure. We open the chicken coop and just allow them to roam around, and it's important because they need to turn that soil, right? They need to. Their droppings are so important for the garden, and they're also eating up all those bugs that you don't want in your garden. So, and it's also protein for them that then they make better eggs. So as it's a whole cycle. It's a whole cycle that it's we're very blessed to be able to have in that little space in the backyard. And so so the area that we're located, we're actually at a dead end. So it's a curse and it's a blessing all in once, because a lot of people don't get to us because we're so hidden in the back. But because we have that area, we're able to have this big sheltered area for our garden. So a lot of people that finally, when they get to us, it's like, wow, I mean, I couldn't, like, I can't believe this is growing back here. Like, I can't believe we have all of this here in this short, like this small space area. So yeah, we try to incorporate a little bit of everything, and hopefully we do get a grant this year for food forestry, and we're able to expand more on the fruit tree portion and fruit shrubs as well.
I'm glad you brought that up because I'm curious, and maybe you can tell us or not. It's completely up to you. But how do y'all fund all this? Is this a nonprofit? Do you have a private sort of equity firm or something? How do y'all fund your initiatives?
Well, that'll be a question for me because I do fundraising. You know, I totally see a lot. I really appreciate the immigrant mentality because a lot of these immigrant sort of modes or MOs are like, you figure something out or you die trying. Like a lot of the folks that come from Mexico, they come here or die trying, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't realize that one of the things that keeps the Latino community so robust in that manner for the people that come from south of the border, or the Latinos at least, is that they're a little bit more gritty in that sense because they have to innovate as they go. They have to understand what assimilation and all these complexities look like. And in the same way, like I've never launched a nonprofit organization before, but I had to figure it out because I love my community. I've never learned how, I have some fundraising background, but I didn't know who was going to fund us, but we're figuring out as we go. So, we have partners like Northwestern Medicine who believes in what we're doing, who funds some of our initiatives. We have a few banks that fund. So right now we probably have about 6 major funders and then a lot of small individual funders. But yeah, we're still growing. We have a relatively small budget for what we do. And I hope that I could get my staff in this operation at a healthier position where we're able to fully execute what we would like to do by allowing our staff to have more hours here, because all of us are here part-time at most. Due to our budget, but we're growing, we're figuring it out. But I think once people hear about what we're doing, they're interested. I think when they visit us, they're very inspired. And then after they visit us, they're like, wow, you guys don't have any competition around here because nobody's doing what you guys are doing within like a 5 to 10 mile radius. So it's interesting just because we have a competitive advantage, and we're trying to figure out how do we use all of these important components of what we're doing and package it well to investors or anybody who wants to invest in the impact that we're having in our community.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, are any of the neighboring communities reaching out to you for help or advice or?
Yeah, we're getting there. I mean, just a community right down the street, they booked time with me. They want to come out, see what we're doing, figuring it out, because our one of our goals is also to eliminate food insecurity in 10 years. So that's not just something we want to say, that's something that we want to execute. So if we could do that here in Blue Island, probably 6 cities that are connected to us, right next to us, also, have the same problems. And if we could crack the code to that, we could share best practices with cities and local governments.
Sure.
So a lot of these things, I'm also taking copious notes and making sure that I'm collecting all of the data as much as possible, just so that we could either turn this into a book or into sort of a small manual for nonprofit leaders that want to solve the same problems.
Good for you. So you talk a lot about food insecurity. And just when I talk about food security, it's usually, at least in my mind, more of a national security. So when I talk about food security, I talk about, the fact that we need to have a certain level of domestic production of, corn, rice, wheat, things like that, to kind of protect us as a country from, any sort of threat or disease that happens around the world. And so we have some domestic production of food that we can all consume and survive on if things get really bad. But when you talk about food insecurity, Could you explain that a little bit? Because I think for some of us who don't live near these kind of socioeconomic communities or have little experience of it, don't know what food insecurity is for some of these families.
Hmm. Would you like to take a stab at that, Rocio? Because I know you use the word food apartheid, which is probably the most more.
Yeah. So, well, food insecurity is actually it's a pretty good way to describe it. The one that doesn't bring or it's not correct or people don't like it, communities don't like it, used to be a food desert. You would hear that too. Oh, it's a food desert because desert makes you think of a place where nothing
Right.
is growing, nothing is prospering. But a lot of these communities are, they're very close knitted. They have culture richness in it, right? So very lively, very awesome communities. But unfortunately, the scarcity part becomes where there's brown and Black communities have been, because of lack of education or lack of resources, haven't been able to. So there might be food available, but what you would find around is a lot of like junk food, a lot of food that is not very good for you, right? That's the food that is readily available. That's the food that's the cheapest food. That's the food, if you go in the supermarket, is the one that you're able to budget in, right? All these quality, fresh, organic produce that are actually really good for you is the expensive food, right? Because even if you get it into your local supermarket, or even if you're available to find it, it's up there in your budget. Like it becomes a luxury, right? You want to get berries for your kids because berries are super rich in antioxidants and all these nutritions, but buying berries is very expensive, and we should all be able to access this. We should all be able to get all this nutritious food to feed our families without having to break the bank. Because I'm going to be forced to get all these cheaper options, because if not, I'm not going to make ends meet. So
Right.
that's the scarcity, component of it. There's not enough to supply us in a way where it becomes affordable to our communities.
Or access. Like Blue Island doesn't have the same access to fresh fruits and vegetables because there's probably only one small grocery store in the whole city. And that's just not enough. I mean, there's a few corner stores within the Latino communities that have like your basic vegetables to make maybe a salsa. But in terms of having a variety or having cruciferous vegetables, we don't have access to them. We don't have a Whole Foods in our community. In order to travel to a Whole Foods from Blue Island, you probably have to go either up north 30 minutes to Oak Lawn or probably 30 minutes to Orland Park. But outside of that, you don't have the same level of access. So that's generally what food sort of insecurity or how food deserts are defined, is not having the equitable access to fresh fruits and vegetables in a community per capita based on what's available.
It also has to do with education as well, because even if you do encounter some of the healthy vegetables available, because you don't know, you don't have the education to know like how they are good to me. Why am I going to eat this? I'm already addicted to all of these other types of food. I'm not gonna eat this. The ones that are looking for these foods, like you would go out of your way to look for certain foods, is because you have the knowledge that these foods combat all of these illnesses and going to make me feel better, going to make me healthier. I'm investing in my body for my future. But that comes through knowledge and education, right? And if we don't have access to that education, how are we going to know? How are they going to know? How are they going to look for it? How are they going to ask for it? So it has to do, it's a lot of systematically.
No, yeah, it's a big subject. And that's why I asked, because
Yeah.
because one, it's, some days I think it's very political.
Yeah.
Access to food. So like, for instance, you'll hear people who are, who maybe don't know, or just a little bit maybe hard-headed. I don't have a hard time saying that. You look, you see these stats as they come across 6 o'clock news, and you're like, these families aren't eating well, and diabetes rates, or whatever the the disease might be that comes from malnutrition and undereducation and underprivileged communities. And to all of us who have, we always say, it's real easy. Well, make better choices, right? Like, easy. Make better choices. Don't buy the soda, right? Don't buy the Twinkies and the Ding Dongs and the chocolate cereal. But to Rocio's point, that's budget. That fits into a budget.
Right.
And the cost of producing 1 gram of high fructose corn syrup is a fraction of a penny compared to producing a head of broccoli. And that's the real dynamic that I think most of the public doesn't understand if you've never been in those shoes. One is access to that type of food. To Moy's point, is there's one grocery store, and forget about Whole Foods. For most of us who work for a living, 80 hours, 100 hours a week, and there's 2 incomes, we can't afford Whole Foods. So I can only imagine some of these inner city, communities that are maybe more blue collar workers and lower income status. One, they don't have access to the food. Number two is, to the educational point, there's generations of families that have never eaten any differently. And that's why I asked about their relationship with food. Is some people's relationship with food is what's at that corner store, a bag of chips and a prepackaged sandwich from that corner store. That's kind of lunch, right? And that's been lunch forever. And why would it be any different for my kids? So you start to build in this generational issue, which we're really starting to see here in the U.S. all over, not just in Chicago.
Well, and it's not only that. I think, I've been sort of reading a lot about neuroscience recently. So I'm no neuroscientist, but, I resonate a lot with the emotional experience that creates dopaminergic memories in all of us. So when you're hungry and you haven't ate, but you eat a salty bag of chips, sour cream, what is that? Sour cream, and the ones that I just ate right here, sour cream and onion. So, sour cream and onion bag of chips. It's like, do I know they're good for me? No, but I have an emotional experience to them because of when I was a child. Because I had a dopaminergic experience when I was a child, and I ate these, and they made me feel good. Do I believe that Chuck E. Cheese pizza? Well, maybe I shouldn't and say any brands, but your X brand of pizza and your X brand of soda, do you know it's good for you? No, but it's associated to really good memories. And a lot of times we want to relive a lot of those memories, whether it's through Pop-Tarts, whether it's through my kids don't eat Cinnamon Toast Crunch, but guess who's still addicted to Cinnamon Toast Crunch? My kids know not to touch it. They're like, ew, like, Dad, how could you eat that? How could you? And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I know I shouldn't be eating this, but guess what? There's an emotional attachment to this because of the memories that I had when I was a kid. And I think in the same way, like, there's a lot of emotional attachment that comes with the way our community eats. And when you're a low income community, I mean, there's only a few options that you have available to you because of the subsidies that are given to you, or a few things that are covered by WIC. So as you go and buy those things, you create emotional attachment to them. And those are the foods that you want to continue to eat even after you move down socioeconomically, which there's a lot of retraining of the brain, and that's really hard. Old habits are hard to kick.
Yeah, such a great point.
Yeah. So even in the food that we donate to the food pantry, there's a lot of needed food pantries in our community. So we're able to provide for them. We're able to provide fresh food, fresh greens to the community, even through the winter in our hydroponics area. But, there's some things that just people need education on. What is this? You have to be, you have to educate, you have to label, what is this? What's it good for? Sometimes even provide recipes.
Right. Exactly.
And use them, like microgreens. A lot of people are scared of microgreens because like, what is that? I'm not going to eat it if I'm not used to it.
Right.
People are very fast to grab lettuces and everything, but show them a microgreen, it's like, I'm not gonna eat that, because it's like Moy said, it's like a reprogramming. But if you explain, it's the same plant, it's just its baby form. Or if you explain, oh, this goes great with this, you can use it for that, then little by little, people, and if they have exposure to it, they keep seeing it, then some change starts to happen.
And also changing the habits of our community. So one of the things that we're focusing on this year is bringing in more sort of culinary foods that are cultural context, that are more contextual to their context. So figuring out a way to maybe incorporate some cruciferous vegetables with tacos or a lot of the cultural foods within a Black and brown community. Because if you were to teach me that, I could actually put, instead of just a little bit of garnish of cilantro and onion on my steak taco, but I could put microgreens and it's a lot healthier for me. And if I make that a habit and I could grow that on my windowsill, I've changed the way that I'm eating. I'm also changing my microbiome. I'm changing my state of mind. I'm changing my health as a result of a few micro changes along the way that are causing big ripple effects down not only to my health, but the health of my kids, because they're seeing what I'm eating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I keep going back to this generational shift, like I said, to your point about the emotional side of food. And you're not wrong. Just about every large industrial food manufacturer and fast food chain knows exactly what specific foods trigger in our brain.
Yes.
There's a real famous company that makes a really great French fry, and there's more science behind their French fry than there is agriculture.
Right.
And that's because that thing dissolves very quickly in your mouth, and that shot of salt is just a dopamine hit that even I can't resist when somebody has it. Like, hey, well, so I get it. I think that generational piece that's the hardest part, and that's why I say it's easy for a lot of us on the outside to say just change, just
Right.
make small changes or whatever. But the small changes isn't even available, or it's 5 generations away, right? Grandma or grandpa that may have migrated from this country or to this country from anywhere were attached to the soil.
Mm-hmm.
And every generation since then, in 250 years in this country, we have gotten a little bit further away from it. And I think that's a lot of our problem, even in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes.
So, well, hey, listen, this is great. I know we try to keep these things for an hour or so, but let me ask you this last question for me, and Brad might have some more for you. But if my favorite question is always, if you had a magic wand and you could achieve one great thing that's on your agenda this year at the Hope Center, what is it, and how might we help, or how might our listeners help?
Yeah. Do you have it or no?
That's a good question. Well, Moy always says, have your dreams written down. Like, think big, right? Think big, and when the money comes knocking, you have something that you can present. So for us, that would mean, for this year, of course, and that would mean growing our gardens, getting into gardens in the front, our front lawn area. So our side gardens as well. That maker space for preserving food that Moy mentioned, that's a big one on our list, because our goal is to teach people to be sustainable, right? Self-sustainable, so they can grow their own food at home, have access to fresh produce in their homes. That's why we're teaching all of this. But the reality is that space, money, how are they going to, it's all going to become a big food waste if they're not utilizing a lot of what's coming out of their garden. So we don't want that. So we want to have that maker space for food preservation in our in available for everyone, so that people can can their food, they can freeze their food, they can freeze dry their food, and we just teach them as part of our ancestors. They grew their food, but they also knew how to preserve that food, right? If not, it's just the same thing. We're just going to grow from May to October, then we're going to waste it, and we're going to go back to the supermarkets and not have access to it. But if we add that component to it, that's just something more.
I love it. It made me think of the taco idea Moy had, which was, those I forget the jar, but it's got pickled red onion, peppers, and carrots.
Yeah.
Yeah, you put that on my engine block and I'd eat it. But on a taco, it's like the greatest thing in the world. So I hear you there. Well, that's awesome. If you could, I'm sorry, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I would say it's sort of, if there's a magic wand, yeah, I mean, I would love to help 100 people in our community build their own garden in their backyard. Now, what do we need for that? We need a network of people that have done something similar to that are in the ag space that could help share best practices. So we need a network and obviously just sort of best practices to do that too. So if there's other people within urban areas that are similar, that have done anything similar to that, that magic wand would be 100. And here within a 5-block radius, like we don't want to do it, it's somewhere out in Chicago. It's just like, no, a concentrated area where everybody's growing together. We're all located in a central location, whether it's a Slack channel or a WhatsApp channel, but we're all able to show our progress. And then everybody's able to come together at the end of that time, celebrate their harvest and exchange a lot of the vegetables, but also be that example for the rest of the city that, hey, this could actually be done. And not only to do that, but I wore a CGM monitor, a glucose monitor, not because I struggle with diabetes, but because I wanted to eat a lot of the cultural foods in our community and see how the cultural foods impacted my own insulin. So to also help the community understand, like help them take markers, connect with Northwestern Medicine, check everybody's A1C, and allow them to see the changes that are able to be made. So allow them to see the value add sort of that we use in business terms, the value add, the value proposition, and what actually happens when they invest their time into this, and what the ROI is, what the return on their investment is when they're doing something like this, not only for them, but also for their families and the community.
Great. Well said. And that's such a great goal. I mean, just 100 gardens doesn't seem like a lot, but there is a lot of know-how there. So if you could, before we jump off, Brad, if you have something here, just I'll just give Moy and Rocio an opportunity. How do our listeners get a hold of you? And by the way, we've got listeners all over the country. We have like 7 different countries that are listening to us. So we're a new young podcast, but we have a pretty amazing reach here in the last few months. So how do people get a hold of you? How do they learn more?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few ways directly. I'll share my email, but mine is moy@hopecenter.tv. It's the domain is TV as in television. So it's moy@hopecenter.tv, or you could reach info@hopecenter.tv. And we, you could also go to our website. Our website, we're actually polishing it. Our Facebook page is the Hope Center of Blue Island. So if you put Hope Center Chicago, you're going to have a ton of Hope Centers come up. But ours is the Hope Center Blue Island. And you'll be able to see sort of this particular branding logo on it that shows it. But yeah, that's how you could get a hold of us. Rocio, you could share your email if you'd like, or not.
Yeah, no, definitely. Did you share your ROCIO@hopecenter.tv? That's our first name, and @hopecenter.tv.
So great.
Yeah.
So great. We'll definitely share that on our channels. We have a marketing couple of people on our team that put all this together for us. Brad and I just, we got the easy job. We just get on and talk.
I just follow him.
A couple of sales guys don't have any hard time talking, so, but hey, we really appreciate it. And if I could ask you, maybe this fall, would you mind coming back on and just kind of sharing with everybody your results for the season here?
I'd be honored.
Sure. That would be great. Yeah, keep us accountable.
Yeah, no, that's great. No,
both.
and likewise, if there's anything you need from Brad and I, you have our emails. If we could help in any way, we could talk agriculture and food, and Brad can talk to you about microbes and things in the soil until the cows come home. So anything we can do, but we thank you both, Rocio and Moy, for being on. and can't wait to see more about the Hope Center there at Blue Island. Thanks everybody for joining us on the Modern Farming Podcast. We'll see you again next week. Take care and be well.
Take care.